The battle is already underway. A giant monster resembling a boar charges roaring straight at the man. Its size is truly frightening, but the opponent shows not a shred of fear. He stands calmly, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Not a single muscle twitched on his face. Absolute cold-bloodedness. One single precise strike proved enough to inflict irreversible damage on the beast. The hero still maintains composure. Even after defeating this giant, he remains focused. On his face are splashes of blood from the defeated beast. A man enters the Adventurers Guild and immediately becomes the topic of discussion. One of the visitors draws his companion's attention to the newcomer, noting that he has an exceptionally high rank, and it seems he was promoted after the victory over the Great Boar. The interlocutor does not believe it, asks again in surprise. After all, it is a rank A monster, and dealing with it is extremely difficult. Meanwhile, the hero himself calmly walks by, probably not even hearing this conversation. The conversation continues. Ballastiner notes that this guy definitely could not have defeated such a beast. However, even the fact that he returned alive commands respect. The man is called by his name. The guild secretary, with a sincere smile, notes the obvious. The hero is not only alive, but also looks completely unharmed. He briefly confirms her words, to which she responds with relief that it is wonderful. The secretary raises her index finger, seriously emphasizing that this mission was simply terrible. And although Hein is quickly advancing upward, his rank is still only C. The man sighs wearily. The girl leaned her hands on the table and indignantly declared that forcing someone to kill an A-rank monster just to be promoted to rank B is true cruelty. Probably the higher-ups are just pressuring the adventurer. She gestures actively, and Hein agrees in his thoughts. This is probably true. Having finished the emotional tirade, she smiles again. Good that the hero is at least alive. She asks if he has even seen this great boar. Hein, scratching the back of his head, casually notes that he defeated it, after which a short, silent pause hangs. The man adds, supposedly, the monster simply couldn't fit through the door, so it remained lying outside. The monster's body is so large that it almost blocks the entire street, and next to it, even carts with horses look insignificant, not to mention people. The girl falls silent for a moment, stunned, and finally asks, "Is he really human?" To this, Hein only smiles awkwardly. She moves away from the counter to the shelves, and discussions are already spreading around. Where did this strange adventurer come from? Someone suggests that he arrived from another kingdom. Although no longer a youth, he still seems like a newcomer. The girl apologizes for the delay and hands Hein a sheet. She informs, this is a B-rank certificate. Hein carefully examines the document, as if verifying its authenticity. The secretary notes that among adventurers, there are not many people with a B rank, so Hein can be considered one of the best. Hein asks again if this is really so, and a satisfied smile appears on his face. The girl confirms with a smile. Yes, that's the absolute truth. She places her hand on her chest and proudly declares that she was his mentor. The hero laughs and asks what the next task awaiting him is. The secretary widens her eyes in surprise. Does he already want to take a new assignment? She advises resting a bit, but Hein looks energetic and confident, replying that, on the contrary, if he doesn't move, he feels worse. The girl asks not to overexert herself, but still goes to the shelves. When she vainly tries to reach something from the top shelf, the man with a sad smile thinks that her concern is probably related to his age. The hero recalls that he never thought of becoming an adventurer at such an age, and yet he manages. Meanwhile, the secretary returns, holding a heavy box of documents, and notes that with the promotion in rank, the number of available tasks also increases. Reviewing the order, Hein finds a personal request from neighboring lands and immediately decides to take it on. The hunt intrigued him. The girl tries to dissuade him, saying that it is a suspicious assignment. It came from the depths of the mountains, and most strangely, it mentions his own name. The hero agrees that such personal requests raise doubts, but curiosity prevails. Why is his name mentioned there? He asks to explain the essence of the task. The task turns out to be amazing. He needs to teach children. Hein asks in surprise if she was mistaken, and yet he agrees. Setting off for the given coordinates, Hein mentally notes that the description in the request was extremely vague. Besides, in the papers, he noticed something strange that aroused suspicion. Now the hero is interested not so much in the essence of the request itself as in who exactly left this inquiry. Following the coordinates, Hein arrives at a magnificent estate located deep in the mountains. A stone fence surrounds the territory, and heavy gates are hospitably open. The very fact that the house stands in a mountain wilderness arouses suspicion. Touching the open gates, the man notes that this also looks unnatural for such places. A man in glasses calls him, informing that Heine was already waiting here. He looks at the stranger with surprise. Recognizing him, the hero realizes that before him is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Golden Kingdom, Sir Julius. Hein asks what the minister is doing in these parts, but he replies that he himself sent the request to the guild. Sir Julius is amazed. He thought the hero had come knowing everything in advance. Hein admits that the name seemed familiar, but he never imagined he would meet the minister himself. Julius says he heard about the difficult situation of the adventurer and decided that this task suits him perfectly. The hero asks what the essence of the job is. The minister calmly replies that everything is exactly as stated in the request. Hein is to teach the children. The minister invites the adventurer to come inside. They enter the spacious hall where they are already awaited. Someone among those present remarks with relief that the waiting has finally ended. Two girls with unusual appearances closely examine the newcomer. Whispering to each other, the elf with pointed ears asks if this man is really their teacher. Her horned friend shrugs, suggesting that he is probably just an assistant. It sounds offensive, but the first insists that it was about him that grandfather mentioned. The friend brushes it off, saying she is just worried. When the girls notice the adventurer's attentive gaze, they awkwardly apologize. One thing is obvious. These girls are definitely not human. Hein says with a smile that everything is fine, but he cannot help but notice one interesting detail. One of them has a special ear shape, undoubtedly. She is an elf, but with the second one, everything is much more complicated. The hero cautiously asks if she might be a dragon. The girl confidently smiles and replies that she is exactly that. And therefore, she adds, she has nothing to learn from humans. This is Hein's first meeting with an elf, and even a dragon, whom he had so far considered mythical creatures. Moreover, this girl is not just a dragon, but a representative of a higher race, capable of taking human form and communicating with other beings. While the adventurer was pondering the origin of the second pupil, she had already indignantly explained to her friend that humans always react this way when they see her. Obviously, she misinterpreted the hero's pensiveness. Sir Julius notes that it is quite natural for representatives of other races to underestimate humans. However, it was humans who once drove them out of their own lands. The girls listen to this with obvious displeasure. The elf girl angrily replies that such words irritate her, and the dragoness only frowns. But the minister pays no attention to their anger. He sternly says that the girls must learn. Otherwise, weak humans will never be able to resist dragons. The dragoness, trembling with rage, tries to contradict him. Finally, she exclaims that humans are worthless on their own and only win by numbers. Sir Julius calmly suggests she prove it in practice. With an unpleasant smile, the girl asks if he really wants to test this on himself. She asks again if it is allowed to kill this man. Hein only smiles and jokingly replies that he does not want to die today at all. Julia tries to convince her friend not to do this, because then the mountain will simply be blown away by the wind. She adds that if Grandpa insists, the elf can manage on her own. Riri waves her arms and exclaims that Julia better not take risks either, or the whole estate will collapse. Interrupting the senseless argument, The hero calmly agrees. Gain lays the sword on his shoulder and suggests, since he has already traveled the path to the very mountains, to go outside. The fresh air will help to concentrate. The girls look at him from under their brows, cautiously but with interest. They step onto the platform in front of the mansion. Confident in their abilities, the girls warn the man not to complain later. Hein calmly asks if they can start. Julia is surprised by his indifference to danger, but is still convinced she can handle it. The space around the elf begins to change. Clusters of energy form a magical attack. The hero watches attentively, with keen interest. He can see elven magic with his own eyes. Julia proudly declares that her power has nothing to do with human strength. She asks if the hero truly despises her just because she is still a child. In response, Hein sharply makes a strike with his hand. His movements are decisive, and the elf woman looks at him with frightened surprise. A light wave, and the magical effect suddenly stops. The girl cannot believe that it is possible to stop a spell with one movement. Hein calmly tells Julia that she should concentrate. After all, losing control over magic is very easy. Suddenly, a shard flies toward her at a crazy speed. An explosion sounds, and a cloud of stone fragments pours down right on the elf woman. Julia understands that she does not have time to dodge, but the hero anticipated this. He instantly picks up the girl in his arms and easily carries her aside, avoiding the blow. Hein smiles with relief and says he made it in time. Julia, stunned by such a quick reaction, looks at him, not understanding how it happened. The hero carefully sets the girl down on the ground. Riri, crossing her arms, frowns discontentedly and mutters that this is nonsense. It turns out Julia almost hurt herself. The dragoness proudly declares that she would never make such a foolish mistake. But she doesn't finish speaking when Hein, who was standing nearby, suddenly disappears and appears behind her. With a slight smile, he says that she could also use some focus. The girl turns sharply, but that's all she manages to do. The hero waves his hand. Riri doesn't manage to dodge. She receives a strong blow to the side and is knocked aside, losing her balance. The dragoness cries out, as if reproaching, that it hurts. She doesn't even realize when he managed to get close. Hein calmly comments that she is too slow, and her movements are too predictable, pushing her aside. Unable to hold herself, Riri falls flat on her back, raising a cloud of dust into the air. Hein points his sword at the dragoness, and calmly says that this is not the end yet. Putting the weapon on his shoulder, the man smiles and continues as if nothing happened. He admits that he really cannot fully comprehend the flow of dragon magic. Human strength cannot compare to it. If he simply rushed forward, he would be destroyed by this power. But there is one important detail. Despite this, he can still effortlessly parry the dragoness's predictable attacks. Forced to listen to his lecture, Riri sits on the ground, tense and silent. Hein wonders if he overdid it with this demonstration. Finally, he asks if she is okay, but the reaction exceeds all expectations. Instead of anger over the defeat, Riri shines with delight. Sparks of genuine interest flash in her eyes, and she rushes to Hein, excitedly repeating how cool it was. She spins around the man, shouting to Sir Julius, who agrees to the training. The minister and Julia watch this silly display of joy with surprise, not knowing how to react. Sir Julius addresses the elf woman, asking her to at least be gentler with him. Julia blushes and looks away, muttering that she has already said everything she had to say. Then the girl asks the minister who this man really is. Sir Julius explains that the hero is a former soldier of the army who fought on the front lines of the Golden Kingdom. A true legend who has trained many talented students. The court instructor Hein, that is what he was once called. And that explains much of what they just saw. The hero corrects the minister, noting that now he is a former instructor. Julia smiles awkwardly, not knowing how to keep the conversation going. Meanwhile, Riri happily continues to circle around Hein. It seems the contact between them is established. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, The girls hone their strikes in a desperate training fight. Although it is only a training skirmish, determination and full concentration can be read in their eyes. Sir Julius and Hein observe everything from the window of the manor, leisurely savoring tea. The minister finally says that it is time to move on to a serious conversation. Squinting, he invites the hero to discuss the details of the upcoming work. The adventurer looks confused, not understanding exactly what is being talked about. Hein asks again what kind of work is meant, since, according to the minister, his current task is to raise the girls. Sir Julius only gestures toward the elf and the dragoness who continue training. The minister clarifies, it was only a request to the adventurer Hein, nothing more. But the conversation that is about to take place now concerns something completely different. Watching the girls, Hein involuntarily wonders why these children train so persistently. Sir Julius says that the current request is addressed not to the adventurer, but to the court instructor. Hein puts the cup on the table, raising his gaze cautiously. He asks again, reminding that he is long since a former instructor. The minister calmly replies that this is not yet a final decision. Then he notes that he heard about Prince Aiden's order, the very one who expelled Hein from the palace. But at that moment, the king himself and the minister were in another country. His Majesty, upon learning about the incident, entrusted Julius to meet with Hein personally. The minister extends his hand to the interlocutor and asks him to tell how everything really happened. Gain momentarily plunges into memories. The events that surface in memory happened only a few days ago. At that time, he was still in the palace and was conducting a regular training session. After another blow, the prince fell to the ground, breathing heavily. The maids immediately rushed to him, anxiously asking if everything was all right. The instructor stood over him calmly, as if nothing special had happened. Gain reproachfully noted that the prince was skipping training again and losing form. Aiden grimaces in pain, trying to get up. The hero calmly says that this is not the end yet, but the prince angrily replies that for him, it already is. Gain looks at him with surprise, expecting explanations. Pointing a finger at the mentor, the prince exclaims that, for the instructor, everything is over. He declares that all the talk about the strongest court instructor is pure nonsense. The hero confusedly scratches his head, not knowing how to react to this outburst of anger. Aiden shouts that this is an unacceptable disrespect to his person. He adds that such behavior is exactly what drives him mad. In the prince's opinion, Instructor Gain behaves too arrogantly, showing not even a drop of proper respect to his higher status lord. Aiden says with a confident smile that he has talent, and it is the instructor's duty to help reveal that talent. For a few seconds, a tense silence reigns in the hall. The prince, still sitting on the floor, continues poking the mentor with his finger, as if challenging him. Aiden looks triumphant. Finally, when the opportunity to speak arises, Hein calmly turns to him. In a cold tone, he replies that he has repeated the same thing many times. It is impossible to reveal a talent that simply does not exist. The prince looks at him with surprise. He is clearly not used to subordinates speaking to him so directly. Aiden explodes with rage, shouting that all the other mentors recognize his talent, except for this stubborn Hein. Suddenly grabbing the training sword, he rushes at the instructor with a shout, exclaiming that if he is incapable of teaching, he has no right to blame the student. Hein easily dodges the slow and clumsy strike. The prince stumbles and falls, hitting his nose on the floor. Getting up, he mumbles curses, overwhelmed with shame and anger. The hero calmly asks what kind of mentors these are who see talent where there is none. Aiden laughs contemptuously. With feigned grace, he spreads his arms and confidently says that he does not need such training. Looking at his hand, as if a great power is hidden in it, he arrogantly declares that he has talent. He just needs to wait for it to bloom. He controls everything, both the sword and magic, and even politics. He continues, losing all sense of measure. The prince grabs the sword, but does not even get up from the floor. Then he sharply throws the weapon on the floor, ending his speech with the words that Hein must know his place. The sword slowly falls, and with a clink, touches the stone floor near the instructor's feet. He looks at this senseless scene with surprise. The maidservants, who witness the humiliating spectacle, quietly laugh. Hein realizes how absurd it is to hear such words from the heir to the throne. He calmly asks what exactly should be learned from this lesson. Aiden, beside himself with anger, declares that as prince, he immediately dismisses the incompetent instructor from the royal court. His face distorts into a self-satisfied grimace. He again points a finger at Hein, assuring that he will never forget how he humiliated his talent. The hero calmly replies that such a thing never happened. The prince, enraged, shouts for him to be silent. Enough excuses. Aiden orders to immediately pack up and leave the palace. Gain pauses for a moment in thought, and, it seems, agrees to go. Meanwhile, the prince is immediately surrounded by flattering maidservants, who hasten to support his words, calling them the only truth. Finally, Hein turns around and asks if the king himself knows about this decision. This question throws Aiden off balance. For several seconds they silently look at each other, exchanging heavy glances. Then the prince, having composed himself, shouts again for him to be silent, and demonstratively turns away. Hein nods to show he understands everything, and calmly leaves the hall. The prince sighs with relief. One of the courtiers approaches closer, praising the prince's wise decision. He adds that although the king valued this instructor, old heroes are no longer needed in the modern world. Moreover, from the courtier's point of view, Aiden is completely right. His talent is truly boundless. The prince loves flattery much more than bitter truth, so his face blooms again with a self-satisfied smile. The courtier adds that this talent will definitely soon reveal itself in all its beauty. At this point, Heina's story ends. Sir Julius only sighs, noting that overall he expected exactly such a course of events. The hero asks if the minister received confirmation from the king himself. He replies that Prince Aiden assured him the instructor constantly humiliated him, made him suffer, and cruelly tormented him during training. Almost carelessly smiling, Julius adds that there will always be people ready to confirm such rumors without hesitation. Now Hein begins to better understand the essence of what happened. The minister takes a sip of tea and quietly says that His Majesty would never have believed the prince's words without good reason. But there were too few supporters of Hein for the king to easily take his side. The hero listens attentively, pondering every word. That is why, explains Sir Julius, he decided to address Hein personally. He says that the current task of raising girls is just an excuse to buy some time. Both look back out the window where the commotion continues. Riri anxiously checks if her hair is messy, while Julia smiles, assuring that everything is fine. The minister adds that even if the hero had not been expelled from the palace, his request would have remained the same. Meanwhile, the dragoness tries to create a giant glowing sphere in the air, and the frightened elf asks what she is doing. Sir Julius says these children are the hope of vanishing races. Meanwhile, explosions thunder around, raising dust and chaos. It seems Riri is winning again in another clash. She proudly straightens up and happily says how pleasant it is to feel victory. The minister only notes that a true mentor must understand this. After all, these creatures now live only thanks to their pride in belonging to the higher races. Riri continues to smile, while Julia, on the contrary, frowns sadly. The minister quietly adds that pride alone is not enough to survive as a people, let alone live a happy, independent life. The hero smiles and asks if this means that people act for the good of future generations. Sir Julius objects. No. First and foremost, this is an important state project of the Golden Kingdom. Hein asks with surprise which exact project is being referred to. The minister explains that all the students of Heine once influenced history and left a mark on future generations. The strength these girls seek is very similar to the one he once nurtured in people. Moreover, if the state establishes good relations with such races, it can bring significant profit, and such a grand plan can become a reality precisely thanks to Hein. Sir Julius explains that the hero has a unique talent to unlock the potential of people. Hein agrees, adding that raising a spoiled prince is a futile task, but raising a true ruler is what really matters. The minister looks at him with a thoughtful smile and says that this is exactly why he was called here, to combine both missions. The hero is surprised. He already suspects where the interlocutor is leading, but still decides to clarify. Without letting him finish, Sir Julius just laughs and confirms everything is exactly as he thought. Opening the window, the minister announces that now they are heading to the city. Hein turns to him with surprise, not understanding the reasons for such haste. Riri instantly intervenes in the conversation, exclaiming indignantly that this is unfair. She shouts that she also wants to go, and sharply takes off into the air. Julia, delayed only for a moment, rushes after her, asking her to wait because she will go together. Both girls rush swiftly to the house, raising a cloud of dust. Meanwhile, the minister places his hand on Hain's shoulder. Solemnly, almost in a whisper, he says that both the dragoness and the elf will become those who lead the new generation forward, concludes Sir Julius, squeezing Hein's shoulder, and confidence in the future sounds in his voice. Capital, Royal Castle. His Majesty sits on the throne. The prince kneels before his father, and the king carefully reads the document, pondering every word. Then he hands the paper to his advisor, who begins to read aloud the names of the signatories. First on the list is the commander of the Royal Knights, Vale. Next, Jin, commander of the elite squad Red Dragons, and Cora, the only adventurer of rank S in the entire kingdom. Having finished the list, the advisor reports, all these people have expressed protest against the exile of Instructor Hein. Without him, the work of entire departments has practically stopped. He adds that the situation threatens to turn into a serious problem for the entire kingdom. The king sighs, touching his forehead. The news is truly unpleasant. But the prince immediately bursts out in indignation, declaring that all this is nonsense. Aiden angrily asks why so many people have sided with this scoundrel. The advisor reviews the document and replies with surprise that they are all Han's protege. So it is no wonder that they are protesting. The prince indignantly reminds that the instructor treated him unfairly, and he is the future ruler. To this, the advisor calmly asks, what will happen if all these people rise in rebellion? In that case, Aiden risks losing the entire kingdom. His words sound like thunder in the silence. The prince asks fearfully if this is serious. The man nods and adds that even one adventurer of rank S, and the 3 others he mentioned, are strong enough to redraw the map of an entire continent. Moreover, many of Instructor Hein's students now hold key positions in the state. Aiden tries to interrupt him, but the advisor does not allow it. He concludes, all this only confirms the enormous influence of this man, and if Hein decides to enter the service of another kingdom, the advantage of the Golden Kingdom will instantly disappear. The prince, seeking justification, laughs mockingly, saying that the talents of his students would have blossomed even without a mentor. Aiden waves his hand again, insisting that everything is not at all as it seems. The king looks him straight in the eyes and coldly says that in that case, one can conclude that the prince has no talent at all. Aiden does not want to hear this. He objects, exclaiming that all other instructors confirmed his giftedness, and sooner or later, it will definitely manifest. His Majesty interrupts his son. Has he really understood nothing yet? The king sternly notes that this very sooner or later may never come. Turning away, he concludes, that is why it is so important to resolve this conflict. The prince stubbornly does not understand why this is necessary. He insists that the instructor humiliated the future king. Aiden straightens up, proudly declaring that the mentor was simply lucky he did not show him true fury. The king looks at his son with obvious concern. After a short pause, His Majesty speaks calmly. If the story of Heine turns out to be different, he will not defend his son. The prince asks indignantly, why? The king replies, titles and status are not everything. The main thing is what a person is capable of achieving, and the mentor simply tried to give him this chance. Not wishing to argue further, The king says that until he hears Hein's version personally, Aiden will remain under supervision. Passing by the enraged prince, the advisor quietly adds that all this is done for his own good. And barely leaning in, he whispers, "There are too many in the kingdom who honor Hein, so the prince had better watch his words if he wants to keep his own head." Meanwhile, the former instructor, accompanied by the minister and 2 girls, is heading to the city. The hero is silent, looking down, immersed in his own thoughts. Riri, still full of energy after the training duel, cheerfully stays close and tries not to fall behind him even a step. Sir Julius addresses Hein, noticing his pensiveness. He says that the hero looks somewhat depressed, while the dragoness stubbornly clings to her new mentor, tightly holding his hand. Gain assures that everything is fine and there is no reason to worry. The minister asks if he really still cannot switch after their conversation. Now the hero definitely knows whom he will teach. Riri, the daughter of the Dragon King himself, and Julia, an elf, a candidate for the throne of the next princess. Sir Julius says with satisfaction that since Hein has taken on their upbringing, the future generation is safe. The hero becomes embarrassed, waves it off, but he is troubled by another question. He turns to Julia. If she claims the title of princess, then she probably has royal blood? She denies it, gently shaking her head. She explains that among elves, the ruler is chosen not by origin, but by the highest level of magical power. However, she adds, this makes little sense, because the races do not develop together. Sir Julius, smiling, notes that he himself is trying to develop magical abilities. Riri laughs cheerfully, and, unable to resist, literally jumps onto Hein's back, joking that even among dragons it is hard to gather all the clans together. In a moment, she is already settled on his shoulders. The hero only sighs, noting that both dragons and elves are truly incredible. Both races have royal roots. Then he asks the minister about his further plans. Sir Julius replies with a slight smile that now they only need to stock up on the most necessary things. Meanwhile, people are gathering on the streets in the city. It seems they are discussing something important. Someone recognizes a young woman. She is the commander of the elite unit Red Dragons. Everyone wonders why such a figure appeared in this place. In conversations, it becomes clear that the Red Dragons are the best combat unit in the entire kingdom, and this girl is its youngest commander. Some hesitate whether to approach to greet her. Meanwhile, she herself calmly sits at a table in the tavern. Everyone is advised not even to try. People like her live in a completely different world. Approaching her is really not easy. The commander calmly waits for the order. The cook calls the waitress, scolding her not to delay. The girl nods, but the tray with the drink trembles in her hands. Approaching almost to the table, the waitress apologizes uncertainly for the delay, and at that very moment, she loses her balance. The tray, along with all its contents, slips from her hands and flies straight at the visitor. The waitress falls forward, trying to save the order, and closes her eyes, expecting to hit the floor. But the important guest instantly catches her just above the floor. Her face remains calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. The waitress opens her eyes wide in fright and opens her mouth, but cannot say anything. The commander lifts her gaze, and suddenly from above, as if to spite, a glass with a drink that was previously on the tray falls. He lands right on her head, drenching her hair and uniform with sticky drops that slowly run down her face. Tavern visitors immediately begin to lively discuss her misfortune, whispering sympathetically among themselves, but the girl pays no attention to this ridiculous incident. She carefully sets the waitress on the floor and quietly says she is glad she is okay. At first the girl smiles, but then she gets scared again. Bursting out with an embarrassed apology, she rushes off and runs to the kitchen to bring a new drink as a replacement. The commander watches her panic and confusion. She wipes her wet hair, and the surrounding visitors return again to the usual topic. What a wonderful commander of the Red Dragons. The tavern owner approaches the commander, deeply bows, and sincerely asks for forgiveness for the incident, promising to have a strict talk with her employee. The girl becomes embarrassed, trying to stop the flow of apologies, and assures that everything is fine. She has no complaints. Both the owner and the waitress, sighing with relief, thank the visitor for her understanding. The commander, however, reflects on how heavy the burden of excessive respect can be. She asks for permission to ask a question, and the man, of course, gladly agrees, promising to answer as thoroughly as possible. The commander says she is looking for one person. The host asks with interest who exactly she means. Recalling her mentor, the girl tries to find words to describe him as accurately as possible, and suddenly an idea comes to her mind. She sharply rises from the chair, confidently straightens up, ready to give an answer. A proud smile appears on her face. It seems she has found the best definition of the person she is looking for. The girl, named Labi, solemnly declares that she is looking for a person who is stronger than herself. But for the tavern owner and the waitress, these words make no sense. They just look at each other confusedly. However, Labi stands, maintaining a proud posture, confident that this is how she described the most important person in her life. Meanwhile, Hain, Sir Julius, and the girls finally reach the city. Riri, delighted by the walk, raises her hands up and exclaims joyfully, making passers-by look around in surprise. She runs forward cheerfully, waving her hand. Julia immediately calls her by name. The elf girl anxiously reminds her friend that this is her first visit to the city, so it's better not to run around alone. Riri laughs, waving her fists with delight. Hein wonders if both of them are so rarely among people. The dragoness turns, and Shining confirms. Yes, they rarely leave the mountains. Noticing something unfamiliar in someone's hands, Riri instantly reacts, eagerly asking what this strange thing is. She runs around, reacting to everything new with childlike excitement. Hein only sighs, realizing he predicted they will definitely attract attention. But still, it looks too conspicuous even for him. The instructor notices another detail. People are increasingly glancing their way. Riri notices this too, but strangely, the looks are not directed at her, but at Hein himself. Nearby, several men are having a hushed conversation. One asks if this is the same man. The other replies that both the age and features match. They discuss that this is probably the same newly arrived adventurer they say is extremely strong. Hein just smiles awkwardly, and the dragoness begins to get annoyed by the extra attention. But suddenly one phrase alarms him. Someone mentions that they do not believe he is stronger than Jin. This name is familiar to him. Hein remembers Jin as a boy, once his student. Sir Julius asks if the hero has heard these conversations. Hein nods. The minister, smiling, says that it seems people really do like him. The instructor admits that Jin has indeed reached a high position if his name is now known to everyone. Meanwhile, these conversations reach the ears of the girl looking for Hein. She jumps up from her seat and runs to him, unable to contain her excitement. People on the street stop, watching her with surprise. Someone in the crowd quietly says they are lucky. They are standing next to the very person the commander of the Red Dragons is looking for. The girl, on the contrary, feels oppressed. The noise and whispering around irritate her. It seems she has frightened people again, just by her presence, but something goes completely against expectations. And now Hein watches what is happening around with anxiety. Hearing a noise behind him, he sharply turns around. In front of him stands Jin, the very commander of the Red Dragons. Riri instantly takes a fighting stance, as if ready to protect the teacher from the stranger. Jin waves her hand joyfully and loudly calls the instructor by name. Now everyone around realizes it is this man who is the person the legendary commander was talking about. The smile on Jin's face gradually disappears, giving way to tension. In front of the astonished crowd, the girl draws a weapon, and in a moment, they and the dragoness stand face to face. Like old enemies, ready for a duel. Despite the suddenness of the encounter, Riri seemed to anticipate the attack. Without hesitation, she lunges at Jin. Hein catches the blow with one hand, and with the other, manages to grab the dragoness by her clothes, restraining her. He sternly says that this girl is not an enemy. Jin, stunned, almost loses her balance. However, she quickly regains her stance. A few skillful moves, and she stands firmly again. Julia, who managed to create a magical shield, asks confusedly what happened, not understanding when Hein intervened. Riri continues to wildly struggle in his hands, growling and burning with indignation, and Jin, as if nothing happened, smiles and greets the mentor, saying that a lot of time has passed since their last meeting. Hein asks how she manages to behave so carefree, even in such situations. However, he is more interested in something else. What exactly the commander of the Red Dragons is doing in this place? Jin confidently replies. Of course, she came to bring her teacher back to the royal court. Hein sighs heavily. He addresses Sir Julius, clarifying that the king has not issued any order for his return. The minister opens his mouth to explain, but Jin already notices him. With a smile and enthusiasm, she exclaims that since Sir Julius himself is present, it definitely means that Hein can return to the palace. Her eyes shine, leaving no room for doubt. However, the hero reminds her that he was expelled by the prince himself and cannot return. Jin asks in surprise why that is. After all, Aiden, though a prince, is much weaker than the instructor. Hein indignantly asks what kind of beastly reasoning that is, but the girl immediately changes the subject, mentioning that she hasn't eaten animal meat for a long time. Her behavior once again reminds that she is one of his former students. Now Jin is the commander of the elite Red Dragons unit at the royal court. From the first training sessions, she showed exceptional talent. Physical strength, speed, and combat instincts made her resemble Riri. Over the years, she developed these qualities and became one of the most powerful warriors on the continent. Gain calmly reminds his former student that strength does not give the right to consider oneself superior to others. Jin, as if not hearing, asks again, repeating his words. She claims that the prince said exactly that. Power determines who is worthy. Hein objects. It is not about that at all. John asks in surprise, isn't it enough for the prince to remain in power? Nearby, Riri is still growling, unable to calm down. Closely watching the rival, the instructor cautiously asks if she happened to have beaten Prince Aiden when she found out about his exile. Jean smiles strangely and remains silent. Hein sighs heavily, noting that such a reaction only frightens him even more. The girl explains that she just found out about the mentor's expulsion, immediately dropped everything, and rushed straight from the assignment, and with enthusiasm adds, if the teacher just says the word, she will personally kill the prince. Hein exclaims indignantly that he would never allow such a thing. Sir Julius, intervening, conciliatorily suggests leaving everything as it is, otherwise Hein will only gain new problems. The hero agrees, acknowledging that the minister is right. Then he looks carefully at Jin and asks again, was it really a joke after all? The girl responds only with the same broad smile and silence. Hein sighs and admits that she really scares him. The secretary of the Adventurers Guild runs up to them, out of breath and agitated. She says she heard an explosion here and, noticing the hero, immediately cuts off the phrase mid-word. She asks in shock what Hein is doing in this place. It turns out that right nearby there is a huge crater, which, obviously, was formed from the collision of Jin with Riri. The secretary's hands begin to tremble. She does not know how to react to what she has seen. The minister, calmly observing the scene, notes that the appearance of the guild representative is very timely. He addresses the girls and says that he would like them to officially become adventuresses. Riri and Julia look at each other in shock, asking if they heard the last words correctly. Meanwhile, life in the guild itself goes on as usual. Adventurers sit at tables, drink, laugh, discuss orders and rumors. But one of the visitors is clearly dissatisfied. In a separate room, a man grumbles irritably about why he has to waste time in this provincial backwater. He cannot believe that a rank B adventurer really appeared in such an insignificant town. In his thoughts, he convinces himself that people with talent should bear noble names, like his littered family. Moreover, with the prince's blessing, His own future is already secured. So why should he deal with all this rabble? This thought clearly flatters his vanity. Hearing noise behind the door, he notices that the corridor has become noisy and guesses maybe the same adventurer has returned. This is worth checking. At that moment, Hein enters the guild, and the hall immediately bursts into chatter. Everyone whispers, asking who this man is and whether he is the same newcomer with great potential. The man who is waiting looks at him with surprise. Could it be that he caused the disorder in the guild? Girls enter after Hein. As always, Riri goes ahead, happily pulling her friend along, while Julia asks her not to run so fast. The dissatisfied man shifts his gaze to the girls, trying to understand if they came with Hein. Could this be his strange fascination? The presence of representatives of other races clearly does not please the visitors, but the girls pay no attention and behave naturally. The man himself, however, lingers his gaze on them, and, full of pride, thinks that such beauties could become his property. At that moment, the guild secretary begins scolding Hein and his companions, saying that what she saw shocked her, and asks how such a huge explosive crater could have happened. For the arrogant man, these words become the last straw. He sharply opens the door and shouts loudly, asking how Hein dared to trample this land and call himself a high-ranking adventurer. The hero turns to him with surprise. Nearby, Riri and Jin are arguing again, creating even more chaos. Gain just shakes his head and calmly asks what nonsense this man is even talking about. Hearing his words, Jin immediately forgets about the quarrel and coldly asks what exactly he said about her teacher. Her gaze is heavy and dangerous. The man instantly pales upon recognizing in her the commander of the elite unit, Red Dragons. Sir Julius, with a barely noticeable smile, notes that Hein, as always, attracts the most diverse people, and judging by the reactions, his presence definitely does not go unnoticed. A confused man asks what all this means. What is the commander of the Red Dragons doing here? And why is the Minister of Foreign Affairs Julius himself next to her? Littard understands that he has gotten into an extremely unpleasant situation, and now he needs to somehow get out of it with dignity. At this moment, the guild secretary notices him. She points to the man and informs Hein that he is the guild leader, Mr. Littard. Adds that she heard. The head of the guild himself wanted to see the hero. At these words, the man's face flares with anger. He perceives it as unwanted interference. Gain calmly replies that if that is really the case, he is ready to listen to the leadership. They sit down at the table. The atmosphere gradually quiets. Everyone looks calm, except Jean, who does not hide her irritation at how her teacher is being treated. Her hot temper is almost equal to Riri's. The dragoness is already ready to intervene, but Julia barely restrains her friend, convincing her that it is not worth interfering in the affairs of the elders. Hein begins the conversation. He directly asks Mr. Littard if there was an order from the main office about the task he received, namely, to defeat an A-rank monster in order to get promoted to rank B. Before he can finish speaking, he hears a sharp bang. Jean slams her palm on the table with a crash, but her next words surprise everyone. She excitedly asks, "So it turns out the guildmaster simply decided to test her mentor's strength?" The man only weakly nods. With an awkward smile, he confirms that this is exactly what happened. Jean happily pats him on the shoulder, saying that this is a trifle for her teacher. Hein and Sir Julius silently watch the strange scene. However, June's mood suddenly changes. Her fingers squeeze the interlocutor's hand with considerable force. Her face darkens, and with a cold voice she asks what would have happened if things had not gone according to plan with the instructor. The man looks at her with surprise and fear, not knowing what to answer. John squeezes his hand even harder, saying that they were, of course, lucky because the teacher is extremely strong. But what if someone else had died? Is it acceptable to risk the lives of those who support the kingdom like that? She continues to press until the man groans and asks her to stop. At that moment, someone's hand rests on her shoulder. It is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. His calm voice reminds that it is time to stop. Jean lets go, apologizing. Sir Julius replies that everything is fine and shifts his gaze to Littard, who now holds his mangled hand, not hiding the pain. The minister coldly remarks that a person of noble origin must be accountable for their actions. He adds that now the guild will find it difficult to find a new leader, so for now he would prefer not to interfere. But he makes a hint that leaves no doubt. When Mr. Littard realizes what the minister means, panic overtakes him. He begins to beg not to rush to conclusions. Sir Julius calmly asks what exactly he wants to say. With a trembling voice, the guildmaster admits that he holds his position by direct order of Prince Aidan. A heavy silence falls over the table. For a moment it seems that the man has won. After all, even the minister would not dare to oppose the name of the prince. However, contrary to all expectations, Sir Julius only slightly raises an eyebrow and calmly says, "So what?" Littard freezes in shock. The minister reminds him not to underestimate the Golden Kingdom. Even if he does not control everything personally, the influence of truth is greater than a name. But Littard has already reached the point of no return. He pales, trying to justify himself, but fear is heard in his voice, and the minister's eyes coldly watch as he traps himself. The minister does not let him finish, and sharply asks whether the guild leader really wanted to humiliate an adventurer. To him, it sounds not like an accusation, but like a cold clarification. Littard, trying to maintain dignity, states that it is merely about an adventurer, and he, by the way, enjoys the trust of the heir to the throne himself. But these words do not impress the minister. Only the adventurers present in the hall. Their looks become hostile. The guild leader continues, saying that the trust of the crown prince is a completely different level, and that is what truly matters. He indignantly asks, can one small incident really erase all his past achievements? Sir Julius calmly replies that, of course, one can hide behind such logic to shift all responsibility onto others. Littard breathes a sigh of relief at these words, agreeing, yes, that is exactly the case. An unpleasant situation, but not a catastrophe. After all, he says, one adventurer is not an obstacle. Even if this adventurer cooperates with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, he still has no right to act against the head of the guild. The mention of the prince's patronage seems to give Littard brazen confidence. Sir Julius, with cold irony, notes that Mr. Littard again despises Hain, and then he adds that this man is not one of those who can be broken by titles or empty threats. Jean impatiently intervenes, stating that no matter what they say, it still makes no sense. Hain asks doubtfully if she is too harsh. The girl just shakes her head as if to say, that's not enough yet. Littard, irritated, addresses the minister. Does he really compare a simple adventurer to an aristocrat trusted by the prince? Sir Julius seems surprised and asks again, isn't that so? Then he continues, what if this adventurer is the mentor of the best commanders of the night squads who guard the Golden Kingdom? Littard is silent in amazement. The minister calmly adds that besides the commanders, Hain has raised many talented people, known both within the state and beyond its borders. Sir Julius nods at Jin, who is just finishing a piece of cake, and reminds that even the commander of the Red Dragons calls Hain her teacher. Then he says that the guild leader has undoubtedly heard of the outstanding figures who stand on the side of the kingdom. Hain, who had been silent all this time, looks at his defender in surprise. Littard bursts out, "This is impossible! This is fiction!" Clenching his fists, he adds that even if we assume that all this is true, then why is such an important person at all in such a place? The instructor calmly asks what exactly he means by such a place. He quite likes this city. The minister, folding his hands in front of him, calmly replies, the decision was made by Prince Aidan, and he, the minister, only supports the guild leader. However, he adds, if it were not for this very decision of the prince, Mr. Littard might still have remained in his position. But now he has too many enemies and too few allies. The guild leader's confidence disappears instantly. He shifts to pleading intonations, justifying that he knew nothing and had no ill intent. Then suddenly he seizes another idea. He recalls that it was only a request, and he suggests, with his authority, he can immediately promote Hein to rank A instead of B. The people in the hall fall silent, shifting their gazes to him, not noticing the reaction. Littard adds with a forced smile, "What do you say, Mr. Hein? Do you like such an offer?" He is already preparing to say something else, but suddenly a sharp voice sounds from the side. Someone rudely orders him to be silent. These are ordinary adventurers who could no longer endure. They angrily shout that the guildmaster all this time only insulted them and considered them worthless. Their appetite vanished from his arrogant speeches. Such interference from ordinary people irritates Littard even more, but he tries to hold on. He has another brilliant proposal. He says that if promotion to rank A is not enough, then he is ready to certify Hein even as an adventurer of rank RS. And then, in the capital, Prince Aiden. The phrase is cut off because the hero interrupts him. Hein calmly but firmly asks to stop this farce. He does not care about all the titles and ranks. It seems none of the offers have any value for him. Sir Julius gently asks if Hein has finished the conversation. Julia tries to justify her impatient friend, but there is no need anymore. Everything has become clear. The man tenderly strokes Riri's head and notices that the children are beginning to get bored from all this adult quarrel. Continuing to smooth the girl's hair, Hein calmly says that he no longer wants to look at such disgraceful behavior from an adult man. Riri is confused, while Julia, on the contrary, looks satisfied with the course of events. The guildmaster clenches his jaw and mutters a curse through his teeth. His hand sharply reaches for the dagger. Drawing the weapon from its sheath, he fiercely orders the hero to be silent. Such a sudden change of tone to outright aggression shocks everyone present. Pointing the blade at Hein, Littard shouts that he will never recognize him. "Who are you to call yourself a hero?" Sir Julius and Jin freeze for a moment, and in the next second, the commander of the Red Dragons sharply raises her weapon. Hein notices that the guildmaster is now completely cornered. They simultaneously pounce on the attacker. With one precise move, Hein knocks the dagger out of his hand. Littard grabs his forearm and cries out in pain. The dagger flies into the air. Hein raises one hand to catch it, while with the other, he firmly grabs his opponent by the shoulder, not letting him escape. Having caught the weapon, the hero calmly says that such things are definitely not needed for conversation. Adventurers were caught with their mouths open. No one even managed to see how he did it. Jean just smiles, unimpressed. She says that this is exactly what she expected from her teacher. After all, he is still faster than her. Riri, shining with excitement, turns to Julia. "Did you see?" The elf replies that she barely managed to follow the movement. The dragoness adds enthusiastically, "It was incredible." And Littard himself, who has not yet recovered, only mutters that this is some kind of madness. Suddenly Hein approaches almost up close, leans over, and coldly reminds Littard that he has already told him to stop. His tone is so sharp that even Jin and the girls flinch in fear, and Hildmeister, losing his balance, falls to the floor. The hero calmly asks if Mr. Littard still wants to talk. Then he turns around and sees that the adventurers around are frozen in complete shock. "What happened?" he asks in surprise, not understanding why everyone is so stunned. Meanwhile, another notable figure is heading towards the guild building. The girl in the pointed hat casually greets someone as she passes by. One of the boys turns to her voice and asks in surprise what she is doing here. Without answering, the girl forcefully kicks the door open. Glancing around the hall, she draws out a long "ooh." As if she really likes what she sees, she notices that everyone is frozen in amazement and says that it even looks funny. Smiling, the girl addresses Hein. Like Jin, she calls him teacher and asks if he agrees that the scene looks amusing. The hero steps forward and says in surprise that he hasn't seen her for a very long time. He addresses her by name, Cora. The girl smiles smugly, looking him straight in the eyes. Hein says that since their last meeting, she has become even stronger. Cora shyly smiles and thanks him, explaining that she achieved everything thanks to her mentor. At that moment, some kid, unable to hold back, pushes Hein away and rushes to the girl, exclaiming how glad he is to see her. An open displeasure appears on Cora's face. She snaps her fingers in the air. And at that moment, the man who wanted to say something freezes in place, unable to utter a single word. Suddenly, the man's hands are tightly entangled by something. He exclaims in surprise, not understanding what is happening, and asks, "What is this?" He turns to the girl and asks with surprise if she realizes what she is doing now. The heroine stands before everyone, holding a bundle of documents in her hands. Her facial expression changes. She suddenly says that because of this man's whims, the fates of many talented newcomers were broken. The onlookers do not understand what is being talked about, but the girl throws the bundle upwards. The papers scatter, rising high above the heads of the adventurers. A quiet pop sounds in the air, and hundreds of sheets scatter in all directions like a snowfall. Cora looks at this with surprise, as if she herself does not fully understand what just happened. The documents are reports, interrogation protocols, and complaints from those who suffered because of Littard's actions. The hero's pupil says that it took a lot of time to study all these cases. The man tries to object, saying that this is some kind of mistake, but magical bonds clamp his mouth shut. The girl continues to say that each of these sheets is proof of his guilt. Then she suddenly remembers something important and angrily utters a curse. She turns to everyone standing around and orders them to quickly gather the scattered papers. Little girls protest, mumbling that it is only her fault. She herself scattered everything. But Cora covers her ears with her hands, pretending not to hear a single word. Her assistants try to gather the documents together, but it is not easy since they are still very small. Someone from the adventurers asks if they can help and receives an approving, "Of course, help." At that moment, another girl enters the room and asks Cora what she is doing here. She snorts in response and says that she should rather explain why she came here. Cora reminds that this is a guild of adventurers, and no one was expecting a newcomer here. But she tries to justify herself, yet Hein strictly asks her to leave. However, the girl does not back down. She declares that then she will also become an adventurer. Everyone present laughs, saying that in that case, the whole kingdom will be turned upside down. She gets angry, demanding an explanation of what exactly is funny about that. Cora is silent, and the minister quietly adds that he hit the mark. Their argument is interrupted by the stern voice of Sir Julius. He demands that these childish games stop immediately. The girls fall silent and watch Hein's actions with interest. He moves with amazing speed, gathering documents. The young man addresses his pupil, asking if she really came only for her reports. Cora replies that there was a little confusion. She just heard about a promising newcomer and decided that it was probably him. She smiles slightly and adds that she decided to verify this personally. Then one of the girls suddenly asks if Cora really came to find her teacher. She confirms proudly, saying that now, when the young hero seems interesting to her, they will be able to work together cheerfully. Everyone around looks at each other in surprise. Hein reminds that his current rank is quite low and asks if she has forgotten about that. He adds that with such status, he and his pupils will not be able to take equivalent tasks. So a joint mission is out of the question for now. Sir Julius agrees. That is exactly what he meant. The minister clarifies that they have just been registered, so the number of requests for them will be limited. Cora sighs, sadly admitting that in that case they are probably right. She says that as long as Littard remains in his position, she doesn't even know where to start. Her words sound with bitter irony. Then the girl suddenly smiles and playfully adds that she anticipated such a development of events, so she prepared everything in advance. She asks if dragon treasures can raise an adventurer's rank, and shares the news. In the Longal Mountains, north of the capital, there is a place considered the boundary of an ancient dragon. They say he died many years ago, but was so powerful that he changed the very shape of the mountains. Cora suggests going there. Maybe real treasures are hidden there. And dragons, according to her, have a natural ability to sense valuables. So this is a great opportunity to test oneself and raise the rank. Another girl asks, who is the client for this task? Cora explains that it is a wealthy merchant from the capital who pays for the search and delivery of these valuables, she thinks. Says she understands everything. But there are few desperate adventurers who would agree to such a thing. Cora widens her eyes in surprise and asks again, really? It is indeed a difficult matter, because with such orders, all found treasures eventually go to the client. The girl tries to explain this with an example, telling how much they will lose even if they find the treasure. Her friends indignantly ask her not to use them in her examples. Cora says that among them she is the strongest, but if she goes without permission, she will look like a confident lone wolf. She imagines with a dreamy expression how she claims all the trophies for herself, sits on a pile of gold, and proudly exclaims that it all belongs to her. Then she adds that the Longle Mountains are open to everyone. Although monsters live there, they do not pose a particular danger if you find the right place. She already sees everyone rushing for those treasures. In that case, if the girls go without permission, they will get rich themselves. The heroine is already ready to set off, but Cora stops her. She says there is a chance to get something much more valuable than money, since the reward will depend on the value of the found treasures. One of the girls, enchanted by her words, listens with wide-open eyes. She's ready to take on any task given to her. A young man gradually begins to understand what his former student is hinting at. He says that, in other words, if you find many treasures, you can sharply increase your rank. Cora smiles contentedly. This is exactly what he was supposed to realize. She adds that the client himself invested a huge sum of money into the guild. Cora reminds that if he is satisfied with the result, he can raise the issue of promotion to rank A, or even S. She asks Hein if he understands what is being discussed. His little student jumps for joy. She is ready to do anything for such a chance. The girl, who had been listening attentively until now, asks in surprise if Cora is not one of those who despise such sudden promotions. Cora smiles and agrees. Exactly. She really does not like such system loopholes. She jokingly says that everyone should look at how her little one's eyes shine. At such moments, she adds, one can even compromise principles. She openly admits that she adores Hain's little student more than anyone else. The girl turns to Jin and asks if she can simply accept that their teacher has such a low rank. Jin agrees. Indeed, if you look formally, their mentor is even weaker than Cora. To this, Cora cheerfully replies that then they will have to introduce a special SS rank, exclusively for the teacher. Jin enthusiastically supports this idea. Hein only sighs wearily, pondering the words of his former student about ranks, and asks everyone to give him at least a little piece. After some time has passed, the heroes finally approach the foot of huge mountains. One of the girls, seeing them, runs ahead and exclaims how majestic they are. She admiringly gazes at their stone ridges rising all the way to the sky, and suddenly something in the sky catches her attention. She raises her head and freezes, staring into the dark shadow. A gigantic shadow covers her, like a giant wing that blocks the sun. Right above her, a huge monster circles. For a moment, the girl is paralyzed with fear, unable to even scream. She barely audibly asks what kind of giant bird it is. Her friend is surprised and explains that it is a griffin. Now everything becomes clear. There are no rank restrictions here, but the question is how far they can go. The girl whispers excitedly that this is incredibly cool. Hein turns to Julia and says that so far everything is happening as she predicted. The Longle Mountains are endless and harsh. Every step in them is full of dangers. In these places, many high-level monsters live, so few reach even the middle of the path. The hero orders everyone to prepare carefully for the ascent, but his energetic student shouts, "Forward!" and rushes to run first. The young man irritably asks everyone to stop. He reminds them that they are going to the mountains, so they must be ready for anything. Here, every bush can hide danger. The girls look at their mentor with surprise. Even in the wild nature, he remains calm and sober, like a true guide. Suddenly, the young man freezes in amazement. His students behave completely differently than he expected. One of the girls asks the teacher not to worry and demonstrates that she possesses nature magic and can control plants. A green glow flares in her hands, and the grasses around come to life. Another student nods approvingly and cheerfully adds that there will be no problems with meat either. She can easily hunt any prey. Both ask the teacher to rely on them. It is enough for him to just walk alongside and allow them to prove that they can manage on their own. Hein understands. For these two girls, the mountains are truly like a native home. He looks at them with gentle pride, as if seeing his former lessons finally bearing fruit. Smiling, he says that sometimes even recklessness can be the best solution. The students look at him in surprise. They are not used to hearing their mentor praise them for impulsiveness. The scene shifts to the guild building, where someone is shouting so loudly that the echo rolls along the walls. Jin, distracted by the noise, shouts irritably that she also wanted to go with the teacher. The Minister of Foreign Affairs sternly replies that even her presence here is already a problem for all of them. Then he shifts his gaze to the bound man and coldly says that he should be glad, at least, that there is still a chance to return the instructor to his rightful place. Cora intervenes in the conversation, agreeing with the minister. The girl must return to where she came from, and she will take care of the teacher herself. Jin shouts indignantly that this is simply meanness, but someone quietly apologizes to her for the harsh words. At this moment, another girl approaches the main character's student and says that she has just received a message from the capital department. She whispers the essence of the conversation into her ear, and the girl suddenly turns pale. But she asks in surprise if it is really true. Jin impatiently asks what happened. The heroine sighs heavily, realizing the seriousness of the news. She says that actually in the mountains where the heroes went, there is no dragon's grave. This is his real home. Just because there have been no news about him for a long time, everyone decided he is dead. However, the magical energy still pulsing in those places indicates otherwise. The dragon is alive. Jin frowns anxiously and asks if everything will be all right with the teacher and his students. The girl explains that the dragon lives in the most dangerous part of the mountains, where almost no one goes. She is sure that the mentor is not so reckless as to wake him up. Jin smiles bitterly and asks, "Has there ever been a single case when our teacher behaved cautiously?" The girl tries to remember, but no matter how much she searches her memory, she finds no such occasion. She helplessly shrugs, not knowing what to answer. Meanwhile, at the foot of the mountains, a small procession is moving. One of those who is lagging behind turns to the leader, suggesting to make a short stop. The guide apologizes but refuses. They have almost no time left, and stopping could cost too much. Suddenly, two shadows fly past them so fast that only a breath of wind remains. One of the men falls to the ground and, raising his head, asks in surprise what that was. These are the students of Heine, rushing forward. Riri shouts joyfully, laughing as if playing. Her companion notes that the teacher is not visible nearby. The girl agrees, adding that he was always too fast to catch up with, and at that very moment, something alarms her. Her gaze is drawn to a strange movement among the rocks. Just before the girls, a column of smoke rises. They smell a familiar scent and immediately understand that it is their teacher. One of them cheerfully says that with such abilities, it is not hard for friends to find anyone. Ahead, the man stops near several charred logs that have not yet burned out. He listens carefully to the surrounding sounds and peers into the darkness, slowly sliding down from the mountains. Seeing the girls, he smiles and says they have come on time. The students barely catch their breath after the long chase. Catching up with the mentor was not easy at all. One of them wants to say something, but suddenly her gaze stops on something behind the teacher's back. Behind his shoulders lie two gigantic bodies of fallen beasts. The girl, looking stunned, asks if he really defeated them himself. The young man calmly nods. Yes, it is his work. Riri, shining with her eyes, runs up to the teacher and enthusiastically offers to cook the meat herself. Her friend only looks at him with surprise, not uttering a word. She recalls how incredibly fast he moved, and still cannot believe that this person managed to overcome such monsters. Hein turns to Julia. He hands her a mug to drink water and catch her breath a little. Noticing her immobility, he asks what happened, why she froze like that. The hero says he planned to walk a little more before it got completely dark, and asks Julia if they should take a break if she is tired. She replies that everything is fine, and wonders what he means by walk a little more. Hein smiles mysteriously and says they haven't even reached the real starting line. But he doesn't have time to finish his thought. Someone called his name. The student asks if it's okay that they continue the path only as 3. The hero asks in surprise what she means. The girl explains that the rest of the groups are falling behind. They find it hard to cover the path, and it might seem unfair. Hein recalls how they overtook several squads and agrees. Now they are no longer on the same level as the others. He adds that he just wants to reach the destination as quickly as possible. Riri points to the mountain peaks and asks if they should go there. Hearing an affirmative answer, she moves forward without hesitation. The friend stops her, warning that there are many dangerous creatures ahead. They need to be more careful, but she just laughs, waving her hand, and says it's okay. She can easily handle any monster. Julia sighs and says she shouldn't be so naive. Hein assures that everything is under control, but a flicker of anxiety shines in his eyes. Inside, he perfectly understands that any mistake here can be costly, both for him and his students. The young man thinks. Riri is carefree because she has no experience, while Julia is cautious precisely because she also lacks it. This task was entrusted to Cora, so somewhere ahead, a trap is hidden. Therefore, it is necessary to move faster and give the girls real combat experience. Hein addresses his students. He says that before moving on, they should train a little. Without practice in the mountains, you won't survive. They step onto an open clearing. Riri confidently clenches her fists, ready to fight, while Julia is nervous and looks around. Suddenly, a huge shadow rises before them. With a roar, a giant monster emerges from the thickets. It is called the demonic beast Elmiraj. The girls retreat, stunned by its size. Hein calmly says that this is an ordinary monster and should not be a problem. Julia carefully watches the enemy, analyzing every move, but she is troubled by the fact that the teacher does not take his eyes off her. She does not understand. Does he really want them to fight under such conditions? However, the hero again addresses the students, ready to turn this dangerous moment into another survival lesson. Gain warns the students that most of the enemies they will face will be significantly bigger and more cunning than them, so this must be taken into account during battle. He announces the training rule. Julia can only use physical attacks, while Riri, on the contrary, is forbidden to use them. Julia looks at the teacher in confusion. Does he really want her to deliberately show her weak points? Gain explains that when they use their power, they win too easily. But sometimes, situations arise when there will simply be no opportunity to use magic or full strength. Riri scratches the back of her head and says she doesn't quite understand the point of this test, but is confident she can manage even without strikes. The opponent won't come close. Julia casts a brief glance at her friend and says she is starting the attack. She asks to be covered from behind. Riri smiles and agrees, but asks again if Julia is sure she can handle it alone. She replies that she can strengthen herself with magic and begins to concentrate energy in her hands. Her blows, though strong, cut through the air with noticeable effort, as if the very space resists. Realizing that half measures won't help, Julia decides to put all her strength into the next attack. Gathering magic in her palms, she bursts forward and strikes the monster. But Elmiraj dodges with incredible speed. The girl can't believe her eyes. Meanwhile, the monster prepares to strike back. Julia realizes she let him get too close. Dodging is no longer possible. She spends the last remnant of magic, but this time, too, she misses. Riri, watching, admiringly notes her strength, but adds that the opponent surprisingly skillfully avoids every strike. Julia turns to her and apologizes for the failure. Riri replies that it's all right, and there's no need to give up. She only quietly adds that this monster is incredibly fast. Julia thoughtfully raises her gaze. She has come up with an idea. She says she has one strategy. Her friend assures her that she will support her in any case. Riri, however, asks doubtfully what will happen if the plan doesn't work. She doesn't quite understand the idea. Julia replies that her partner is a true strategist and thinks faster than anyone. She sincerely smiles and says that is why she trusts her unconditionally. Julia blushes, but quickly begins to explain the tactics. Having finished the explanation, she takes the necessary position. The enemy seems to perfectly understand all her movements, sensing every intention. That is why he always manages to dodge even a strike from a blind spot. However, such a lightning-fast reaction leaves a brief pause before the counterattack. Julia decides to take advantage of this very moment. At the moment the monster freezes for a fraction of a second, she will deliver the decisive blow. Turning to Riri, she gives the signal to act. Both girls rush forward, merging in a common impulse. Thanks to Julia's cunning tactics, they finally break through Elmirage's defense and knock him to the ground. Julia exclaims with joy that she hit. Her eyes shine with victorious fire. Riri, thrilled by success, rushes to hug her friend. She thanks her for the support and smiles, but the joy lasts only a moment. Behind Riri, suddenly, a shadow rises, and the beast stands up again. Julia shouts that the fight is not over yet, and orders to cover the rear. Riri sharply turns around, realizing that the enemy is very close, and there is no time to dodge anymore. Hein instantly assesses the situation and sees that his pupil is in a difficult position. He sighs briefly and says there is no time to hesitate. Action must be taken immediately. The young man approaches Riri and calmly says that now she can use magic. Hearing the teacher's permission, the girl instantly activates the power. A stream of magic bursts out, and she easily repels the monster's attack that was already hovering over her. From the tension, her body slightly trembles. Her face distorts with a brief pain. She turns to Julia and asks to retreat. The real finale is coming next. Riri sharply pushes off the ground, rising into the air so high that for a moment it seems as if she's flying. She takes a deep breath, and spirals of energy begin to swirl around her. Using all her strength, the girl exhales, and a stream of fiery breath bursts from her lips, tearing through the air and covering the enemy. Julia rushes to her, trying to hold her friend so she doesn't fall from exhaustion. Meanwhile, Riri clenches her fists and makes a final effort, directing the magical flow at the target. With a new wave of power, she finishes the attack. An explosion flashes at the spot where the monster just stood. The creature falls to the ground with a deafening roar, raising a cloud of dust. Riri lands nearby, barely standing on her feet. Julia rushes to her and says with relief that everything is fine. Just one breath from her was enough. However, Riri, smiling through fatigue, notes that this power cannot be used too often. Julia asks in surprise why. The girl sighs and begins to explain. She says that her breath is not just magical fire. It can summon a real dragon. Meanwhile, the action shifts to the foot of the mountains, where 2 adult students of Hein are following the tracks of the squad. Jig asks his partner if anyone has been harmed. The girl is silent for a few steps, staring into the distance, and does not answer immediately. Then she quietly says that everything must be fine. The teacher is too strong for anything to happen to him. But if the ancient dragon suddenly wakes up... She doesn't finish the thought and interrupts herself, adding that maybe it's good the mentor is nearby. If the dragon truly awakens, the entire kingdom will face disaster. Even the strongest knights will not arrive in time to help. They are equal in rank to the teacher of a fairly high level. But this time, even their strength may not be enough. The girl thoughtfully says that perhaps they will have to rely on the help of the children, the very same pupils whom Hein took under his wing. Remembering them, she asks if these girls are really as talented as they said. The partner replies that they are indeed quite strong, perhaps even more than they seem at first glance. She smiles contentedly, as if to say, then one can be calm. 100%. A true hope, she says warmly. The partner asks in surprise what she meant. She just laughs. It's just a saying, something like our talisman. Suddenly the girl stops as if remembering something important. She says that Riri once mentioned her power can summon a dragon. But so far, nothing like that has happened. The partner notes that if every use of such a breath really led to the appearance of a dragon, it would be extremely dangerous even for themselves. He thinks and adds that the main problem is that Riri herself still does not understand the true nature of her power. Julia quietly notes that it has become suspiciously calm around. Hein nods. Indeed, at this altitude the air is clean and still. Here one can catch their breath and calmly begin the search. The girls climb onto a high rock ledge. Before them unfolds an incredible view. Endless valleys disappearing among the mountains and silvery clouds slowly drifting below. Julia, holding her breath, says excitedly that this is the most beautiful place she has ever seen. Riri looks around, full of energy, and suggests going even higher. Her friend immediately grabs her hand, restraining this fiery nature. Meanwhile, Hein thinks that this height level is quite enough for treasure hunting. The young man turns to the female students and calmly asks if they know what level monsters inhabit these places. Riri smiles confidently and says that she has already defeated them more than once. Julia adds that there should be no problems. The teacher looks over the remains of the fallen monsters and thinks that their rank is truly high. But the girls grow so fast that it no longer seems to be a problem. He smiles and says that this is exactly where a real treasure hunt can begin. Riri jumps for joy. "Can I already?" And her eyes shine with delight. Julia unfolds the map and says that she has already planned the research route. Hein reports that he will stay here waiting for them and check what was found. The girls agree and scatter in different directions. But after a few minutes, a joyful cry from Riri echoes from the depths of the gorge. She has found something. She runs up to the teacher, holding a strange object in her hands. The young man is amazed at how quickly she managed. Together, all three examine the find. Among the gold coins and acorns, an ancient artifact of a strange shape is visible. Hein suggests that it is an item from the times of ancient civilizations. He says contentedly that everything is going wonderfully and orders to continue the search in the same spirit. The girls cheerfully respond, "Yes," and scatter again. Meanwhile, Hein takes out a flask and decides to rest, enjoying a sip of the cool drink. He reflects on how incredible this place is, where even the air seems filled with magic. Before him towers a whole mountain of found things: coins, fragments of jewelry, ancient medallions. He carefully examines the loot and smiles. It seems the girls here feel as natural as at home, but soon Hein notices that they have not returned for a long time. Worried, he heads into the forest thicket, searching for them. Suddenly, something stirs nearby. The sound of a quiet rustle catches his attention. From the bushes, cautiously peeks a girl in a school uniform, a little dirty from the journey. She comes out and awkwardly says she got lost, but finally made it out. Seeing a shiny object near Hein's feet, she asks if it counts as treasure. He nods, and the girl happily replies that then they can exchange all of it. But suddenly another stranger runs out from behind the hill, cheerful, noisy, with a sparkle in her eyes and a few more small things in her hands. She laughs as if casually and scatters the glitter of dust left on her fingers. Brazenly glancing at Hein, the girl mockingly says, "And who is this lost one here? Is this pensive idiot a teacher?" The young man narrows his eyes in shock. "What did you just say?" "A moment." And he is already beside her, grabbing her shoulder with a lightning-fast movement. Twisting the arm, Hein sharply stops the stranger, and she screams in pain. Suddenly, Julia's voice is heard from behind. She is calling the teacher. The girl says they found something interesting nearby. Hein nods and replies that this is great news. Riri, hearing her, also runs up and asks what happened. Seeing the stranger, she freezes, examining her strange, pointed ears. "What is this trouble?" she exclaims, preparing to attack. But Hain gestures to stop her and says it's better not to do anything hastily. The stranger smiles crookedly and says she thought all the people who came for this mission were weak. Riri laughs and replies, "Oh, that's complete nonsense." The stranger sharply raises her voice and orders Riri to be quiet. Her tone sounds brazen and commanding, as if she is used to being listened to without objections. In response, Riri frowns, puffs her cheeks, and theatrically imitates a dragon, growling, waving her arms, trying to intimidate her rival. Julia sighs and says that it seems not only they managed to get here. She asks the stranger if her arm still hurts after the fight. The stranger mumbles an apology. Instead, the foreigner asks in surprise what an elf is doing here. A new argument begins among the girls. Riri touched on the topic of the injured arm. Hain watches from a distance, thinking that by origin, this creature is probably a beast man. He carefully examines the stranger from head to toe and says he has never seen ears and a tail like that. He thinks she has quite a high rank. The teacher asks her to tell a little about herself. The girl laughs and agrees, adding that everyone should listen carefully. She proudly says that her name is Maine, and that she belongs to the clan of divine beasts. Hain asks again which beasts exactly she means. Julia whispers that she once heard from her grandfather a legend about such creatures. They are capable of taking human form. Riri immediately adds that this girl really looks a lot like her. It turns out Maine is a dragon in human form, and the mixing of her powers with human ones gives her amazing advantages. Hain asks what her purpose here is, and repeats the question when she evasively remains silent. He notes that if she is also looking for treasures, there are more than enough in the mountains. Maine shakes her head in denial. Seeking wealth is not her goal at all. She says she simply likes to have fun with people because they are always unpredictable. Hain raises an eyebrow. She really has a strange character. Riri, flashing her eyes, asks if such a strange beast could become dinner. Maine looks at her stunned. "You want to eat me?" The girl says that people rarely come here, and when she is bored, she just plays. The teacher asks if she has a family, or if divine beasts even have parents at all. Maine smiles crookedly. "You humans know nothing." Riri indignantly defends the teacher, but Julia restrains her, calling for calm. Maine continues. "Divine beasts are not born like other creatures." She says she exists by herself, without parents, and without a home. Julia looks at her sympathetically, feeling that she is beginning to understand her loneliness. The wise elf explains, "Divine beasts are not born from their own kind. They appear spontaneously, as if randomly chosen by the world." Hain finally understands the meaning of their words. Maine is not just a creature, but a living embodiment of natural power. He turns to Julia, ordering her to remove the protective spell that was still restraining the stranger. Maine looks surprised. She did not expect such a gesture of kindness. Clenching her fists distrustfully, she asks if they really freed her not to mock her. Hain quietly asks, "You are just lonely, right?" Julia looks at her mentor with surprise. Sincere compassion sounds in his voice. The teacher adds that a lonely life without purpose, without friends and affairs, is probably the heaviest boredom in the world. Maine gets angry. "You speak as if you know everything about me." She sharply asks what they intend to do next. Hain smiles and offers her to join them. Maine blinks in shock, not believing what she heard. Hain says his students would like to have such a friend. Riri, shining with joy, throws herself around her neck, but Maine deftly dodges and grumbles. "So, I have to be friends with these little brats?" After thinking it over, Maine finally nods. If the mentor insists, she will go with them, but only on the condition that no one interferes with her having a little fun. There is feigned indifference in her voice, but her eyes betray curiosity. Riri, like a hurricane, throws herself at her neck for the second time with a victorious shout. The hugs are awkward, but sincere. and even the reserved Maine barely softens her stern expression. Julia quietly giggles, covering her smile with her palm. In this strange company, it seems the chemistry of friendship has finally started working, albeit with teasing and barbs. The new team member, quickly surveying the surroundings, asks what to do next: fight, train, or already take the loot. In response, she catches lively glances and a brief, almost battle-ready plan. Riri announces the obvious without hesitation. We continue the treasure hunt. Her voice rings with excitement, and the wings of enthusiasm already carry her forward along the mountain path. She waves her hand at Maine. Whoever brings the most is the winner. The conditions are as simple as an arrow, making them even more attractive for a fiery competition. Rule 2. If you run away, you lose. No excuses and almost made it. Only an honest count and quick feet. The jungle of rocks will be the arena, and luck the judge. The girls, exchanging glances, spring from their places and scatter in different directions, each following her own route, leaving behind laughter and traces in the dust of mountain trails. Maine snorts. Do these new girlfriends really think they can surpass the divine beast in the forest, which he knows better than his own palm? Confidence burns like embers. She throws a promise after them. You will regret challenging me. The words sound not like a threat, but a playful acceptance of the challenge, where glory and full pockets of trophies are at stake. Maine disappears among the spruces, shouting over the echo, "No cheating, and count honestly." Riri and Julia laugh, tease her in response, and dissolve into their own hunting paths. Hein, watching their lively quarrel, involuntarily wonders. The royal dragon, the elf contender for the princess, and even the divine beast. How did all these worlds come together in one team? What Sir Julius has planned is a mystery, but the events are unfolding increasingly interestingly. Every step in the mountains reveals a new layer of the plan, which the mentor only guesses at. He suddenly stops. The magical pulsation of the wind seems to have intensified with the appearance of Maine. Could it be she who caused the strange stirring of the power, imperceptibly sprouting from stone and snow? The gaze rises to the peaks. From beneath the deep drifts emerge the outlines of a giant dragon, like a shadow imprisoned in an icy crust, breathing on the edge of sleep and awakening. Meanwhile, Jin and her partner, having caught up with the squad, stop. The first joyfully says they made it, but the second shakes her head. Something is wrong here. The feeling is oppressive. To the surprised, why? Jin hears a calm answer. For now, silence, but the signs are already there. The earth trembles and whispers, as if warning of a fault beneath their feet. The gaze turns to the ridge. The dragon has awakened. The mountain lures with a black abyss and seems threatening, as if the soul of an ancient giant is reclaiming its body. In the city, far below, people chat evenly until an invisible wave of power strikes with stunning force. The air hums, rows of chairs overturn, and several are knocked off their feet. Passers-by look around, asking each other, was it an earthquake or an explosion? Anxiety grows like a snake and is already crawling into the square with open jaws of rumors. Both girls closely track the tremors, comparing the heart of the city with the rumble of the mountains. Each shock resonates in the bones like the strike of a bell. The younger apprentice clutches her head. The magical background cuts the hearing. She senses the direction of the wave, like a compass tuned to an ancient breath. The girl quickly casts a spell. The air around thickens, turning into a transparent platform that lifts them above the crowd, giving the voice a wider space. Both rise above the cobblestones. The partner asks what kind of magic this is, and hears the answer. Sound amplification. Now every word will reach the farthest yard. A magical megaphone is pressed to the mouth. This is the commander of the Red Dragon squad speaking. Echoes over the square. I am Jin. What is happening here? People freeze, recognizing the voice of power. The crowd buzzes. It's Commander Jin and Korra. Their names fly like a wave through the crowd, changing fear into focused attention and faint hope. The girls ask the townspeople to remain calm. Panic is the worst enemy. Their tone is confident, the command precise, like a blade cutting through chaos. The tremors will subside, but evacuation is necessary, the announcement sounds. The nearest safe refuge is the city of Audia. The apprentice projects a map in the air, marking the route. Captain Jin adds, "If you leave right now and follow the indicated route, we guarantee the column's protection." The words fall over the city like a firm vow, but people still ask, what is really going on? The partner nods to Jin. It's time to speak carefully but honestly. The truth is sharp, but only it can maintain order and guide steps away from the abyss. The heroine announces that the dragon is beginning to awaken. The crowd instantly plunges into panic, screams, commotion, the cracking of wooden stalls under the feet of fleeing people. The girl rises above the crowd and loudly says that now is not the time for panic. Everyone must leave for the neighboring city as quickly as possible, but the townspeople refuse. Some shout that, as adventurers, they are obliged to help fight the monster. Others, on the contrary, fall into despair, saying they cannot match the dragon, and ask not to be dragged into this madness. Jin sharply interrupts the disputes. They will only interfere. Her voice is firm, like steel. She orders to leave the city immediately, while it is still not too late. After these words, most residents rush to flee. The streets quickly empty. Only dust swirls behind the frightened figures. Jin watches with satisfaction as the crowd obeys her order, but the partner shakes her head. This is not joy, but a delusion. She reminds, if the teacher is nearby, it does not yet mean that the danger has passed. And thinking that there will be no new destructions because of him is a big mistake. Jin abruptly stops, realizing the meaning of what was said, and says that they need to find a mentor as soon as possible. Her fussiness begins to annoy her friend, who prefers to act coldly and deliberately. Riri, who had been silent all this time, again puffs out her cheeks in offense, showing displeasure at the commander's childish antics. She comfortably settles on the main character's shoulder, like a little spirit helper, and asks, "Teacher, what did you just do?" Hein grimly replies that he does not know, but even the spirits shuddered, as if the earth itself was frightened by the awakening. Maine, their new companion, quietly says that it has awakened. Hein cautiously asks, "Who? It?" The girl is surprised. Could it be that he really does not know about the dragon? Julia intervenes, asking if it is about herself, but Maine waves it off. "No, I am also a dragon, but this one is completely different," she briefly explains. Simply put, it is a big lizard. Riri, sitting in the teacher's arms, asks if it is possible to bypass that lizard. Maine shakes her head. It is impossible to bypass. She adds that this dragon is terrible, because after hundreds of years of sleep, it has become even bigger and stronger. Its body is now part of the very mountains. Maine warns, even in sleep the dragon can kill all living things. And at that moment, a griffin flies over their heads, searching for prey. The monster, unaware of the danger, murmurs to itself what kind of meal to prepare today. A human or a deer. Flying just over the cliff where the dragon sleeps, it involuntarily disturbs the ancient lord's peace. The shadow of the lizard moves under the snow. The griffin tilts its head with curiosity, not understanding what it has seen. Delighted by the potential prey, it suddenly dives down. But suddenly, a plume of smoke bursts from the crack, thick as volcanic ash, and instantly engulfs it. A moment later, the griffin falls. Dead. The heroes silently watch as its body rolls down with a rumble. Hein asks, "Did he kill him just because he got too close?" His voice is dull and heavy. Maine replies that they won't even have time to hide. The dragon senses life from a distance and can take it without waking up. Somewhere below, griffin chicks plaintively call for their mother, not daring to fly out of the nest. Julia whispers, "He really took the griffin's life," and looks at the snowy slopes where everything has frozen. Maine adds that now, since the dragon has fully awakened, its power will grow every moment, faster than any of them can react. She says that even if they win, this entire area will be destroyed, and if they lose, the whole continent will perish. She bitterly smiles at Julia and jokingly adds, "Sweet treats won't help you. This is too dangerous a matter." Hein thinks that after centuries of sleep, the dragon has merged with the earth, and now its very movement can destroy the forest. He looks intently at Maine. Her face is tense, but fear flickers in her eyes, which she tries not to show. The teacher gently addresses her by name and asks, does she really not want this forest to perish? Maine gloomily replies that there is no point in answering this question, because if they do not flee, they will perish along with the forest. Her voice sounds calm, but despair can be heard in it. Hein gently says that if she at least admits that she does not want this destruction, everything can change. But the girl does not trust him. Distrust flickers in her eyes, like a flame before a storm. She glances at him and sharply asks if he really intends to fight the dragon. Julia grabs her head. This is madness. Maine warns that even she, a divine being, is powerless against such a monster, let alone a human. But the young man calmly looks her in the eyes. There is something in this forest that you want to preserve, right? He asks. His words sound almost gentle, but strike straight to the heart. Maine suddenly quiets down. Images of childhood flash before her eyes. A clear lake, warm lights in the windows of an old hut, the gentle laughter of those who have long been gone. Hein continues, "You don't want all memories of your family to turn to ashes, do you?" The girl clenches her fists, trying not to show her anxiety. He warns that protecting the entire forest will be difficult, so he needs the exact place, the one that is most precious to her. Riri runs up, hugs the new friend tightly, and asks her to tell quickly, jokingly offering a candy for courage. Maine sharply pushes her away and shouts for her to be quiet. The voice sounds harsh, but trembling can be heard behind it. She says that it still makes no sense. Why say where this place is if nothing will change? We just met, she adds. Why should you care about my family if they are no longer here? Her words break off in a deafening silence. A heavy pause hangs. No one dares to break the silence. Only the wind rustles in the branches. Finally, Maine looks away and says that they need to run. She is sure that her new friend simply won't have time to hide. Then she quietly adds, I also want to run away, without thinking about anything. But if you die, I will never forgive myself. There is sincerity in her voice, which is hard to turn away from. Julia sighs and tells the teacher that he tried so hard, but in vain. Hein only smiles and calmly replies, It's okay. Then he turns back to the students. He asks Julia if she can address the forest spirits to find out the place that Maine wants to protect. She looks at him in surprise. Teacher, are you really going to do that? Hein says that before them is just a dragon that has been sleeping for hundreds of years. Julia smiles nervously. Yes, sleeping. But even in sleep, he was dangerous. She warns that Maine's words are not an exaggeration. If the dragon loses control, the continent will really be destroyed. Julia explains that although dragons are not creatures of divine origin, those among them who live for millennia acquire divine nature themselves, even without royal blood. If this happens, he will become the most terrible monster, capable of changing history itself. Riri widens her eyes. Can I also become such a dragon? Julia immediately replies, That is exactly why we need to run, and as fast as possible. Otherwise, it's the end for all of us. Hein smiles slightly. Running away is a good option, but I want to choose another. Julia is outraged. This is not just a good option, it is the only possible option. The teacher calmly asks if she really does not see that. He asks her to calculate the enemy's strength and their own capabilities, to look at everything not with emotions, but with reason. Julia focuses. Her thoughts work like clockwork. Every calculation is precise, but the result is still not in their favor. Riri, who was standing nearby, suddenly exclaims that if nothing can be done, one must simply become a strong dragon. Her eyes blaze with determination, her voice filled with fearless naivety. Julia, hearing these words, suddenly understands something. As if a chain of thoughts has connected into a single whole, she mentally acknowledges that their teacher is extraordinarily strong, and Maine possesses incredible power bordering on divine. Julia herself can become the perfect support for them. Her magic strengthens allies and restrains enemies. But despite all the calculations, anxiety remains in her heart, not for herself, but because even the strongest can make mistakes when it comes to the ancient dragon. Julia, looking into the distance, realizes this dragon truly echoes divine power. It is not just a beast, but a creature touched by eternity. She asks the teacher what they can do against such a being. Hein turns to her and mysteriously says, "Perhaps you should look more closely." The girl frowns, not understanding. More closely? How much closer can I look? She again shifts her gaze to the horizon, where the shadow of the mountain seems alive, as if preparing to sigh. Julia strains her eyes, trying to discern anything through the fog and dust. Her eyes ache, but she stubbornly gazes into the distance, as if she herself wants to see fate. Hein, observing, sees that she is exhausted. She cannot do anything, even if she wants to. He quietly places his hand on her shoulder, a brief gesture of support amid the approaching storm. Meanwhile, the action shifts to the mentor's senior students. Step by step, they walk toward the mountain, filled with anxiety and determination. Their faces are serious. They already feel the awakening of the monster. Riri looks back at the teacher and Julia, who, exhausted, lies on the ground. "Teacher? What now?" she asks, and Julia, through her breath, adds, "What do you need?" Riri silently raises her eyes to the summit and says, "It's too late to run away now." Her voice is calm, but there is a strange determination in it, almost fatal. And at that very moment the earth trembles. The dragon finally awakens. The air compresses from the pressure of its breath. The giant body stirs. Joints crack after centuries of sleep. Snow falls from its back like dust from a stone statue that has come to life. The giant lizard raises its head and lets out a roar that tears the sky. The sound wave rolls through the valleys, destroying the fragile shelters of people. The inhabitants of the nearest towns scatter in panic, and Jin, with his partner, standing at a distance, watch as the ancient horror awakens from a millennial sleep. Hein steps in front of the students, shielding them with his body, and carefully watches every movement of the monster. His eyes are cold, his mind fully focused. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, in Prince Aiden's chambers, a dull rumble is heard from the window. The air hums from the distant echoes of the dragon's awakening. Someone from the courtiers throws a whole pile of documents, orders, reports, complaints, onto the table. The papers scatter in different directions. The prince jumps to his feet, furiously pounding his fist on the table. "Why do I have to sit here?" He's irritated by the routine itself. Scribes, officials, petty orders. He's convinced that the people deserve to see him in action, not in papers. "This should not have happened," he mutters. "It's all his fault!" Envy and hatred mix in his voice. The prince is convinced that he still has many supporters. "Wait for the instructor's testimony, and everything will be decided," he whispers. If he dies, he won't say anything anymore. A plan is maturing in his head. Insidious, cunning. First, he needs to find like-minded people. He's sure that among the guards and aristocrats, there are those who do not like his great enemy. But there is a guard at the door. There is no exit except for one. He comes up with an idea worthy of a fool: to escape through the window. The prince tries to squeeze through but gets stuck. The situation is pitiful. His legs are dangling. The cloak is tangled on the handle. He mumbles to himself, I trained too much. That's why I became too strong, or too fat. And he himself understands that this is a lie. Nearby, a sweet face peeks out, and a cheerful voice is heard. Is that your exercise? Yes, training is a useful thing, the prince replies with feigned calm. Oh, then you were just in time, says the young man standing nearby. Maybe I can help you get out. But then he adds, Aren't you under house arrest? The prince growls angrily. Shut up! It's none of your business where I am and what I do. The young man only smiles innocently, agreeing, Of course, Your Highness, you know better. I am already an adult, the prince says, trying to maintain dignity. I decide for myself what to do. It seems the young man internally agrees, although a hidden cunning flickers in his smile. The prince believes that even this commoner acknowledges his power. Exactly so, he exclaims proudly, as if he won the argument, though he still helplessly hangs in the window. In an awkward pose, he continues to think aloud, boasting, You are a commoner, but you must understand. The commander of knights is no ordinary person. The young man smiles unpleasantly. I understand. I understand all too well what you mean, Prince. His eyes flash with cold light for a moment, hinting that this conversation is only beginning. The young man calmly says that just as he, a commoner, was able to attain a high position, everyone in this kingdom has the freedom to achieve their own results. His words sound sincere, but his gaze hides an icy firmness. The prince nods with pleasure, agreeing, and adds smugly, Yes, this is wonderful. After all, this is my kingdom. The young man barely smiles and quietly asks again, Really? Yours? The spoiled heir proudly straightens his shoulders. Of course. I am the heir to the throne. My time will come very soon. You understand what I mean, right? His voice grows haughty. He is convinced that he was born to be king. Noble blood, education, training, all prove his exceptionalism. It is obvious to everyone that he is the next ruler. The young man covers his face with his hand, sighs, and says, Now, everything is clear to me. Then he asks permission to ask the question again. How did it happen that you are here if you are under house arrest? The prince hisses angrily. None of your business, and then a new thought flashes in his mind. He can order this commoner to do whatever he pleases. He turns to the young man with a cold smile. You came to me because you understood that you would always be safe next to me, right? He draws out, trying to seem confident. So, the time has come to work together, proclaims the prince, leaning forward. Let us use my knights to punish the one who humiliated me. Molodik looks at him calmly and says that first he must make sure of one thing. He reminds the prince that he promised to tell something about the royal tutor, Hoin. The prince confirms that it is indeed about him. This man is not a teacher, but a traitor, growls Aiden. I want you to meet him immediately and sort it out. But the young man cuts him off with a short no. The prince asks in shock, What? Suddenly the young man's face distorts. The lines of his features change as if dissolving into shadow. The prince freezes in horror. The glass in the window cracks, and shards fall down as he recoils. Who are you? He whispered, clutching his head. The young man coldly reminds, The head of state must protect their face. The prince convulsively grabs the chair, pointing at it with his finger. You have no right, he shouts, but his voice breaks. The young man lowers the blindfold from his eyes. Calm down, Your Highness, he says quietly. But every word echoes with a threat. If you scream, you will be found very quickly. His smile is too gentle to be human. By the way, the situation you created will be difficult to explain, he adds. The prince does not understand. What are you talking about? About nothing, he replies coldly. Better tell me one thing, the young man continues. Why did you dismiss the former mentor? The prince snorts disdainfully. Isn't it obvious? I must not lose my freedom just because I drove out a man who did not respect me, he shouts, pounding his fist on the table. The young man spreads his hands. Freedom is good. The prince, not understanding, repeats, "Yes, freedom, but she has consequences," the young man calmly adds, leaning closer. His movement is so fast that the eye cannot catch the moment. A sword appears from the air, drawn from an invisible sheath. The prince neither manages to react nor to realize what happened. Molodik is still smiling. "When you use freedom, you must also accept its consequences," he adds quietly. "Choosing words, one should be more careful." The prince stretches out his hands, begging, "Wait, I already explained," he shouts, gasping. "I did it only for my own protection. Once everyone preferred him, Hein, so I just had to get rid of him." The young man clenches the sword and says, "Your crime is not exile. Your crime is that you expelled your own mentor, whom you were supposed to honor." He sharply grabs the prince by the throat and presses him against the wall, eyes shining like ice under the moonlight. "You deprived me of the person who was like a father to me," he says quietly. And in his voice, there is not only anger, but also pain. "And now you will pay for all your sins." His smile returns. "Good thing you didn't try to escape. Enjoy, Your Highness, the last seconds of your freedom." The youth does not swing the sword. He only bows his head and coldly says that it is time to accept the consequences of one's own actions. His voice is quiet, but in every word, an irrevocable sentence. The prince struggles like a fish caught in a net. He gasps hoarsely, trying to break free from the hands that squeeze his throat. In his eyes, fear unbefitting the heir to the throne. The blade flashes down, stopping just near the neck. Silence tears the air. And then the same sweet, eerie smile appears again on the youth's face. "Just kidding," he says lightly, as if nothing happened. The sword slowly lowers down. "Actually, I just wanted to joke a little, Your Highness." He steps back a step, wipes his face with a handkerchief, and adds almost casually, "Now that I think about it, a pebble got stuck in the window. Probably that's what His Highness tripped over. How unfortunate." A guard's voice is heard at the door. "Commander Vale." The young man nods. "Yes, that's me." Together with the guards, they drag the lifeless body of the prince back into the chambers. They still do not know what they will say to others, or if they will be able to explain it at all. One of the guards, breathing heavily, thanks. "Without your help, Commander, we wouldn't have made it," he replies calmly. "Yes, taking care of such people is not an easy task. I want to at least somewhat ease the burden on my subordinates, but deep down he thinks something completely different, that it would be simpler to cut off the head and put an end to it." This thought flashes like lightning, and the guards notice a brief spark in his eyes. He smiles again, now more gently. "But if the prince dies after all, it will create certain difficulties for us." The guards agree. Yes, the death of the heir will only complicate the situation. The young man raises his gaze to the sky. "I'm already late, but I wonder how he is." Nostalgia is heard in his voice, as if his thoughts are flying to someone far away. Meanwhile, on the mountain slopes, Hein looks at the summit where the awakened dragon rages. Riri stands nearby, lowering her eyes guiltily, and says, "It's all my fault." The dragon is so huge that it can be seen even from hundreds of kilometers away. Its back is like a mountain ridge, moving under the sky. Hein says ironically, "Looks like the lizard slept well." Julia turns around, irritated. "Teacher, now is not the time for jokes." Riri, eyes wide open, adds seriously, "But it's true. Even I sleep better than he does." "Don't lie," replies the teacher with a warm smile. And even amid the tension between them, the usual domestic closeness breaks through. Julia quiets down and asks, "Teacher, will everything be all right with us?" Fear sounds in her voice, which she cannot hide. Gain looks into the distance and honestly answers, "I don't know. Maybe, yes." He raises his eyes and sees how the enraged dragon lifts its head to the sky, breaking the clouds with its own roar. For a moment their gazes intersect. A human and an ancient creature, two worlds converging at one point. The dragon roars again, and the ground beneath their feet trembles. The air shatters from the force of the sound, as if the mountains themselves are screaming. Gain does not look away. A fire ignites in his eyes, not fear, but a burning passion for battle. He smiles, as if he has finally met a worthy opponent.